Hey there, folks. Welcome to the GM's Alcove. Got another replay for you. The Battle of Tifernum, part of SPQR, GMT's Game of Wars of the Roman Republic. This is the second scenario from the Barbarian expansion, and it should prove to be quite fun. It's a modest size battle. Romans and Samnites going on it in the Third Samnite War. We're going to get this started today with the first turn of the game. Now, in this part, and probably the next couple parts, you'll see me go into some detail regarding the rules of the game, just so you guys can follow along a little bit better and understand the flow of play. I will go into the sequence of play quite extensively, show you guys how it works. But anyway, folks, let's jump in there and start this battle. All right, folks, we're almost ready to begin turn one. Just want to point out a couple things before we get started. And one is a special Triari tactical doctrine, which applies for any battles prior to 200 BC. And that is this battle. And basically, your Triari are very defensive. They're a last-ditch defense line. They typically aren't used aggressively during this period. Which basically means they cannot leave the hexes they start in. So all these Triari are stuck where they are. Now, they are allowed to change facing during the battle, of course. Now, there is two exceptions to this. One is they are able to move if they are 6 or more hexes away from all of the legionnaire troops, the Principi and Astati and Velites and such. If that occurs, they will be able to move, and that's basically their chance to play catch-up, move back up into a closer position to support the front lines. So there is that. The second time that they can move is if enemy units that they can see in their line of sight are 3 hexes or less away. They are able to move in that case. Now, they can't move and shock. They can defend themselves if an enemy moves and attacks them. They are able to fight back, but they're not normally able to move and attack an enemy if and until the army route point total reaches 1/2 its max. Now, I should point out that the Roman route point total, which is when they withdraw and break from the battle, is 150. Half of that is 75. So if the route points reach 75 or greater, the Triari will be able to move and shock attack at that point. So we got to keep track of that. And I'll go into the route points in a minute. So they're basically stuck where they are until one of those situations occurs. Another thing I should point out is I did move one of the leaders for the Romans. I put him with the Velites. That's one of the Praefecta. He's up there. He's now with the Velites. That'll help me get them moving forward with a line command in the very first turn of the game, which I want to do. So I did adjust that. And yeah, just wanted to point those things out. Something else you definitely need to look at is how you win the battle. Now, at the top there on the map, I wrote down the route point maximums for both armies. We've got the Samnites at 120. We've got the Romans at 150. And I also made a little note of 75, which is 1/2 the route points of the Romans. Now, those numbers are the maximum route points an army can take before it routes and withdraws from the battle. The battle is over, and that side has lost. So basically, the Samnites can take up to 120 route points before they withdraw. Romans are 150. And how you get route points applied to your force is units are eliminated. For instance, when a Roman unit is eliminated from the battle, its TQ value is added to its route points. So, for instance, if a Triari unit had a TQ of 6 and it was eliminated in the battle, 6 points would be added to the Roman route point total. And, of course, these current values, your route point current values, are checked at the end of each turn during the withdrawal phase. So, basically, that's the objective. You're trying to break the enemy by doing damage, forcing him to withdraw from the battlefield. So yeah, I will be keeping track of those totals as the battle progresses. Now, some units are worth a different value than their TQ, like leaders that are named, like Rullianus and Ignatius. They'll be worth a different value to army route points. But for the most part, it's whatever the TQ value is on the unit. And like, for instance, if we take one of these Triari, we'll see right there, it's a 6. That's the bottom number next to the 4. That's its TQ value. That unit is removed from the battle. Its TQ value will be added to the Army's route point total. So that's how that works out. So folks, we're ready to get into turn 1, and let's begin. All right, we're ready to begin the first turn of the battle. One thing I should point out, right there at the top in B, I've put a little tribune. That is the flanking detachment leader. That is my choice of entry point for the battle. So I put that little counter there to remind me. So let's keep that in mind as we play. I'm going to choose entry point B. So now we're ready to begin the turn proper. Activation phase, leader activation, starting with the lowest initiative rated leaders. Now there's 2 of them. Both Perfecta have initiatives of 2. It's on their counter, second from the left. So I get to choose which one I want to activate first. And I'm going to choose this one here with the Velites. And he has a choice. He can give up to 2, which is the value of his initiative. Individual orders, in other words, give orders to up to 2 units, including himself. That would count as 1. Or he can give up to 1 line command, another value on his counter, third from the left. And I should point out once again that all the leaders in this battle can give up to 1 line command per activation. So there is that. The only requirements to do so without rolling a die to see if it's successful, that is to give a line command, is that this activated leader has to be within the command range of the overall commander, the OC. That's Rulianus, who has a range of 6, the first value from the left on the counter. He's 6 hexes away, which means he doesn't need to roll a dice to see if he can activate this line in his initial activation. So all is good. The only other requirement for a line activation is that the units must be capable of being given a line command, as well as the commander can issue them a line command. That is the case here. All these units of Velites can be given a line command by the Perfecta, and all of these Velites, the entire line, qualifies. They have the same orientation, same adjacency rules, and again, all this is covered in the main SPQR rules. They can be up to 2 hexes away from each other, in this case on their flanks. So this entire line of Velites is going to take a line command from the Perfecta to move forward to about 3 hex range away from the light infantry of the Samnites. Nice little distance. That way, if the Samnite light infantry advances on me, I'll be able to reaction fire, firing on them before they fire on me. So yeah, we're going to do that. Also note there is a slope here, which going down, although it doesn't cost any additional movement points, it can cost a cohesion hit on the unit so doing, per level of slope descended. Not the case for the Romans. That only applies to heavy infantry and medium infantry units, I believe, none of which these units are, except the Triarii, which are heavy infantry. Of course, none of these Triarii, you can just see them here at the bottom of the shot, they are not on slopes, so it wouldn't apply anyway. So let's carry this out and I'll show you the results. Okay, so the Velites have moved forward. You can see I kind of scrunched these guys together a little bit to support one another. Otherwise, I kept their 2 hex range apart from each other. Now, the leader, the Perfecta, can also move with the line if he so chooses. But if he does, he has to end his movement within command range, his command range, which is only 3 of units in that line, or at least 1 unit in that line. And he will do so, since he can move with this line command. Otherwise, for him to move, it's basically an individual order to give. So when he gives a line command, he's also able to move along with the units in that line command, as long as he ends within command range, his command range, of a unit within that line. So let's move him up. He has a movement of 9, so he can really move. We're going to put him right there. We don't want him involved in the combat, but we want him close enough to be of some use. So that's it. That's his one-line command. He is done. His activation is done. Next, we go to Shock Combat. We resolve any combats that occur. And there is none. It's basically when you move adjacent to an enemy, you can shock combat, or you have to shock combat for certain troop types. Not the case here. There is none. There was no shooting during movement. Range for javelins and pilums is only 1. You have to be adjacent to the enemy, so none of that kicked into gear. So we go to C, Momentum Phase. This is where we decide, do I want this Perfecta to go again? And just to keep things simple, I won't attempt a momentum die roll. It's basically a D10 roll of equal or less than his initiative rating. Remember, it's 2. So he'd have to roll a 2 or less on a D10 to be successful at it. If he is successful, the opposition has the opportunity to trump him with one of his higher initiative rating commanders. And the lowest initiative rated commander the Sam Knights have is a 4. So yeah, and the trumping commander basically makes his own little initiative roll, needing in this case for this guy, for instance, initiative 4. He'd need to roll a 4 or less to trump this leader if he was successful. But that's not the case. We're not going to go into that. Keeping things really simple here initially before things get messy and combat begins. So he's not going to attempt a momentum die roll. Again, he could if he wanted. Sometimes it's worth just trying. If he rolls a 9 on the attempt, however, that causes a die roll of doom, which is a little table you roll on, and it could result in several different things. Maybe that'll come into play. It's not always a good result. Usually it ends with just the leader being finished. So we'll skip that. So that's movement. That's the activation. He is now flipped to his finished side to show that he's done for the turn. At this point, it is possible he can be reactivated during the turn, but that's a rare occurrence, and we'll get into that if it happens. But normally, he's finished for the turn. He's done. He can't be activated and give orders or line commands again in the battle. The next thing we do is we go back to the first part of a turn, which is leader activation phase, phase A. And that's where we choose the next lowest initiative, which is a 2. This Perfecta over here, he's also a 2. So he gets to do the same thing he did. He also has the opportunity to use momentum, and so on and so forth. So this Perfecta will now activate, and we'll see what he does. Had to take pause and think there for a second. Basically, what he's going to do is he's going to do the same thing that commander did, only he's going to do it with this line, the Hastati line, as well as some cohort units, which is the term used for the non-citizen units. He can give a line command to all of those, and they all qualify. They're all in one single line, so that's what he's going to give a line command to. He can give up to 1 per activation. He's going to basically have this entire first line move forward, kind of pretty much where they were previously, maybe about 3 hexes behind the Velite, like right about here would be good. And all these units, even though they're stacked, can all move to those positions. So I'm going to carry that out for you guys. And there they are. The entire line has moved forward. This Tribune here was left behind. He was stacked with one of these guys here. But the entire line of Hastati has moved forward to this position, all in one line command. Also note, I did move the Perfecta as well. He ended with that unit, or that stack rather. And also note that I left them stacked, which is ideal, because if the enemy does come close during his activation, I can react to that by forming a line extension. So these guys can pop out of their little double stacked hex here and form a nice solid line if the enemy approaches too close. So I always have that option if the enemy gets too close. I can also do that as a order and do it that way too. I didn't do it this way. So we're just going to move them forward, leave them spaced out. That way the Velites have room if they route to go through, because you don't want your friendly troops routing through your hex. It's not good. So that's the end of him. Now, there's no melees to resolve. So he has to decide if he's going to use momentum to go a second time. I'm not going to in this case, so I'm going to flip him to finished as well. You can see, folks, it's fairly straightforward and simple, especially in the beginning stages of the game when you're making line commands instead of individual orders, which is what happens when units get involved in combat and that sort of thing. And basically, he's finished, he's flipped, and it goes to the next in initiative order, which would be this Tribune here and this Prefecta with the cavalry, who are at 3 initiative. So they would go next. And I'd have to decide which one, this Tribune here, in which case I would probably move up the Principe line in a similar fashion up behind them, which I will do. Or I could do the cavalry and move them up a little bit. So at this point, after showing you the movement, how it all works, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip ahead. We're going to move this Principe line up to this position. Again, spaced out similar to the Hastati line. We're going to move our cavalry very slightly forward. I don't want to entice the enemy to move forward on me, although we can probably best them, the enemy cavalry, if they do come close. I don't want to throw them forward too far. And the Triarii will probably remain here. They're probably going to be within 6 hexes of the Principe, so they might have the option of moving, but I'm probably just going to leave them there anyway. And that'll finish both of these Prefecta, or this Prefecta and this Tribune, I should say. And it's going to go to initiative 4, which will be the Samnites. So let's finish this, and then we'll get to the Samnites. All right, and there they are. And I should point out something. There was actually 3 Roman commanders with an initiative of 3. This Tribune here, and this Cavalry Prefecta. And they all just went. The cavalry moved forward slightly. This line moved forward, and the Tribune moved up to this position, the extra Tribune. So nothing fancy, straightforward. Rullianus has yet to be activated, which he will shortly. And we could move on to the next in the initiative. One thing I do have to do is flip these to their finished side. So yeah, straightforward, nothing fancy. I do like to use momentum whenever possible, but I'm not using it in this beginning stage since I'm trying to show you guys how it works. But needless to say, a momentum allows you, that commander, that activated commander, to go up to 2 more times past his initial activation with certain requirements. But anyway, that's it. Romans are done, except for Rullianus. He is initiative 5, so that means the Samnites are next with, let's see, we have a 4, we have another 4, and then we have a 5, and then a 6. So next up is going to be these 2 4s. I should point out, Rullianus does have, because he's higher rated than these 4s, he will be able to trump if one of these Samnite 4s attempts a momentum successfully. So that's an interesting thing. We'll see if that happens or occurs in the game. Right now, Rullianus is pretty much out of the action. He's way down here, but not a bad thing. So first up, we're going to go to the Samnites. One of their 2 leaders, this one or this one, will now activate and do something. Things are getting close. Now, before we get into the Samnites, I should point out one thing. I've been using line commands for the Romans straight through this, including the cavalry. If you remember, the cavalry weren't in an actual line. They're kind of in a clump. And basically, to issue a line command, all the units in that line have to either be flank to flank, as in a line, or rear to front, as in a column type of formation. However, none of these guys qualified if I wanted to include them all for a line command. They were more like a group. You can still do it. The only requirement, if they're not in flank to flank or front to rear alignment, is that they're all within the command range of the activated leader. His command range is 4. They were all within 4. And even though they were in a different orientation, some of them were flank to flank, some of them were front to rear, I could move them forward as a group still with a line command, which is what I did. And this is where they're currently located. So that's how I pulled that off. That was actually a line command. For individual orders, he only has a 3 for his initiative, so that's 3 individual orders. He couldn't do that with individual orders, not without using momentum. He'd only be able to activate and move 3 units, so it wouldn't work that way. So that was the use of a line command for a group or cluster of units. I should also point out that this Perfecta can only command cavalry. He can only give line commands or individual orders to cavalry. So he's a unique one, apart from the tribunes and the other Perfecta. So now let's get to the Samnites. All right, so there we go, folks. We just finished off the Romans as they moved forward. We still have Rullianus to take action. But prior to that, the Samnites are up next. And we'll see what they do with their cavalry and their first line. Most likely they will start moving forward, and we might see some missile fire. And I'll go into the mechanics of that stuff as we resolve that. And we'll see our first blood, perhaps, in this battle. So, folks, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions on the rules of the series or SPQR in general, let me know. Like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Till next time, folks, you guys hang in there. It's only going to get better. Stay tuned.